Hey guys, my name is Xzirez, and I'm going to be doing a kind of in-depth tutorial, or not tutorial, but in-depth guide on how to play Paladin. And this is going to be not just about my deck or around mid-range Paladin, it's going to be around the whole Paladin class and what you want to be playing, and what cards you want to play, what cards you don't want to play, what matchups are good for it, things to look out for, etc. But I'm going to be taking a kind of starting point, um, or starting point for my deck. And it's going to be based on this build, but I'm not saying this build is the 100% best build for you because the meta might be different, but I'm saying this is really good, and most of these cards that I'm playing should be played if the meta is similar. And I figured I would start with an introduction first because some of the people that watch this video might not really know who I am. And some might have seen me on ladder or played against me or seen me post my decks or whatever. But you might not know who I am. And for those who don't know, I am Xzirez. I have been legend every season in Hearthstone since they rearranged the ladder system. I have been top 3 almost every season with almost every deck in the game. I think there's one deck I haven't played to rank 1, or no, there's 2 decks I haven't played to rank 1. Or 2 classes, I mean. And I've finished top 20 2 or 3 times. But I'm not really that good at finishing a ladder. I'm just really good at getting high and then dropping a million ranks. And I don't really play in much tournaments, which is probably the reason why people haven't heard of me. Because ladder players just don't get any attention, basically. Because, I mean, how would you know about a ladder player if they don't play tournaments? You wouldn't know them. So yeah, that's basically me. And I played Paladin since GVG, basically, since the class became good. And it's one of those classes that I really, really like, and I feel like I learn a lot when I play. And yeah, it's really, really great class. And I feel like I have enough knowledge. God, I'm sorry. I feel like I have enough knowledge now to actually make a guide and talk about some of the cards because I've basically tested most of the Paladin builds you can make and kind of figured out what's good and what's not good and so on and so forth. And so this type of list or something similar to this is what I think is the best to play. Um, I don't think there's much I don't think there's a lot of changes you can do to this. There's definitely some meta choices and text that you can do to change this list, but I think that this list is pretty close to optimal. If you're running something that's very different, you should just really scrap it because I'm like 100% sure that this type of Paladin build is the way to play Paladin. Like this is what you want to be doing at the moment. There's no reason to play like aggro or control or whatever, and there's no reason to like cut something like knife juggler in this list either. You just want to stick to this. It's like the basic kind of, I don't know, head or layout. And yeah, some of these are text choices. Like I'm playing 2 zombie chows because there's a lot of aggro and because my deck is faster basically. But if the mana was more control, I would play one. But things like playing one equality is kind of a tech, but it really isn't. You only really want to play one equality for the most part because playing 2 is way too slow. But playing one owl, on the other hand, is attack. You could choose to play 2 instead, which is better against 2. But I usually wouldn't play 0. I think playing one owl is good. And 0 can be good if the meta has a lot of like death rattle minions that you just want to silence. But I think you should definitely play one. And I think you should definitely only play one equality. I was debating whatever to play 2 equalities was good because there's so much Patron Warriors, but it doesn't really help that much. I mean, you could make the Patron Warrior matchup like 100% matchup if you just change all these cards and add like Pyromancers and all sort of weird stuff. But the ladder still isn't like 100% Patron Warrior, and if you rearrange a lot of these cards, your matchup against stuff like Hunter and Sulak is going to be way worse, and it's just not worth it at all. I figured that the only way I actually lost to Patron Warrior was if their draw was godlike. They had to have a extremely good draw to win. If they don't, they just get tempoed out early by Paladin. Or if I have Master for Battle and Quartermaster, it doesn't matter what kind of combo they have. They just die turn 5 anyways. But yeah. So I don't think it's worth playing 2. I don't think there's any reason to play 2. I really don't see any reason to. If you're playing 2, just like cut 1. I tested playing 2 a lot of times, and every time I tested it, it was just way worse. I mean, you can try it for yourself and play 2 and see if it works, but I'm like 100% sure it's worse. Almost 100% sure. And then, of course, you're always going to be playing 2 Knife Jugglers. You basically never want to cut this card. I'm not sure why people are deciding to cut this card in some lists. In my experience, this card wins a ton of games in Paladin. It's just if your opponent can't deal with this turn 2, they're dead. And if you draw this late game, it's gonna be able to ping off a lot of stuff, and it's gonna combo in Muster. This card is just great in Paladin. I really see no point in only playing 1 or playing 0. I think you should always play 2. It's just a great card. Like, the only situation where it's bad is if you just play turn 2 and you're against a deck that can kill it very easily. But if you're against a deck that can kill it very, very easily, you always just have the option of hero powering, playing Minibot, playing Owl, or playing Zombie Chow turn 1, which makes this able to not get killed, basically. So I really don't see any reason why I wouldn't play 2 of this. It's just a great card. Because if you get this combo off, like if you get this turn 2 and then into this, you often just win the game if you're against the aggro deck, or if you're against the control deck as well. It deals so much damage and clears the whole board. It's pretty insane. And it's also a good late game, this combo. And you're always going to be playing 2 Chilla Minimonts as well. Card is great against aggro, it's great against control. No reason to cut this ever. Same goes for Muster. Same goes for Alder. No reason to ever cut these cards. They're completely standard. I'm not going to take too much time explaining why they're so good. They're really good. And you're not going to be cutting Big Game Hunter, and you're not going to be cutting True Silver either. All these are core. I don't think you should cut any of these cards. I think you could definitely change the Iron Beak Owls, the quality, and the Zombie Chows. But these are all standard. All of these. Blessing of Kings, however, is not standard. Or I'm thinking it should be standard in Paladin, actually, after playing with it for a long time. It basically is one of the things that Paladin lacks. Or it actually is 2 of the things that Paladin lacks. It's being able to trade really well with your small dudes into the late game, and it's being able to do a ton of burst damage. If you have True Silver and Blessing of Kings on turn 8, it's going to be 8 damage from hand. And if you also have a True Silver equipped, you're going to do 10 damage if you have a Consecrate. There's a ton of sort of burst potential with this, which is extremely good in Paladin. It's basically the one thing you're lacking in Paladin, it's burst. There's nothing else you're lacking. If Paladin just had more burst, it would be so much better, and I think Blessing of Kings is a really, really good way of having some burst and also potential to trade upwards with your small minions. Which, as I said earlier, is both things that Paladin is lacking. So I have not had a single game, I think, where this card is bad. I think I've had, or I think I might have had like 1 or 2 games where this card has been bad in the past like 200 or 100 games. It's just been insane. Like as I said, trades upwards, gives you burst. It wins me so many of my games. I have no clue why people aren't playing this. There is just no reason not to play this, like really. So yeah, play this card. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. I think I explained it pretty well now, but it gives burst and makes you trade better. That's basically what it does, and it's so obvious that you should be playing this card because yeah, no reason. I don't see any reason why people aren't playing this. Yeah, let's move on. Consecrate is of course standard. You could be playing 1 sometimes, but you should probably always play 2. Body Shredder, also really standard. Never cut this card. You should never play Sentient over this either, because the card is so strong. It's like a 4.5, 5 mana drop for 4 mana. It should never be cut. There's no reason to ever. Just play this card. It's one of the most broken cards in the game. Don't ever replace it. This card can be replaced though. Healbot. This is only because there's hunters on ladder. If there weren't so many hunters and so much aggro decks in general, this card could for sure be cut. There's no reason to play healing for 5 mana for the most part. And this card could basically be cut for anything that you think is good. And it's only against hunter. It's really nothing else. It's just aggro decks in general, kind of. If you have this card, you just win. There's really no reason for me to explain it either. It's just you heal for 8 and you stall the game and you win. So yeah. You should never play 2 though. I think 1 is fine. 2 is too much. So you either play 1 or 0 of this. You don't want to play anything else. If you play 2, you end up with too many dead cards in your hand. And if you play 1, then you're safe against Hunter. And if you play 0, then the meta's going to be no Hunters and a lot of control. So you're only going to be playing 0 or 1, probably usually usually 1. A Surgic is another card that I have like no clue why people aren't playing. For me, it's pretty obvious to play this card because it gives Paladin draw, which is something they've been lacking for a long time. The only really good options that Paladin has for draw is Lay on Hands or a Surdrake, and the Surdrake is just a great minion in general. And if you're playing a low curve like I am, then this is just going to be a kind of a card that makes you not run out of cards to play. And if the meta is very control heavy, you need to like refill your hand. So you need to have some kind of draw in your deck. And since the only good card during the game is basically these 2 cards for a Paladin, then you always want to be playing this card. So you don't run out of cards in the control matchups. It just makes your draw more consistent if you play 1 or 2 of these. It makes it so you don't run out of cards, as I've already said like 1,000 times now. Because a lot of your cards are very like weak and situational. Some of these cards, like Zombie Chow, if you draw this late game, it's really bad. So you need some kind of draw, and Surgic pretty much fills that role to some extent. It still only draws you 1 card, but it's playing 1 or 2 just makes you all of the games where you're sitting there and you want to draw cards, you will have this in your hand, you will play this, and you will win the game because you're having to play or you're playing with 1 card extra. So yeah, the card's great. Great minion in general. Draws a card, something Paladin has a problem with. I'm playing 1 now because there's sort of shift in the meta. It's going from being really aggressive to being more control-y. So it's not quite control yet. But if the meta was a lot of control, I would play 2 of these. For sure. It's really great. And if the meta is a lot of aggro, you play 0, basically. And then the more, like the higher, or the more control heavy the meta becomes, the more Xzirez you want to play. And the less zombie chows you want to play. And the less heal bots you want to play, so on. And Quartermaster is a card which I have for a long time only played 1 of, and I've also for a long time played 0. But I think playing 2 is correct, to be honest. I think playing 2 is much better than playing 1, for the most part. I weren't playing 2 of these before because so many people played around it. Like when Paladin first came out, everyone played 2 of this card. So if you're playing 1, because everyone was playing so hard around this card, you were getting so much value because you didn't have this. So your opponent was basically playing around something you just didn't have and they were losing value. But now most people either run 0 Quartermasters or they run 1. So people won't play around it that hard because it's unlikely you're going to have one of them, or it's unlikely you're going to have one. So playing 2 makes it really like more consistent now because people aren't trading as hard into your tokens, your muster tokens. But I think if people start really playing around this card more, it won't be that good, and I will probably end up playing 1 again. But since people are playing, since people aren't playing around Quartermaster, then playing 2 is completely fine. Because if you get overvalue out of this card, the card is just insane. Like if you get 3 or 4 or 2 tokens, this card is really good. The only time where it's bad is if it's sitting in your hand and you're not getting any value from it, or if you play it on 1 token. Because if you play it on 1 token, it's really not that good. But if you play it on 2 or 3 tokens, the card's insane. So it's just a consistency thing. If you consistently get 2 or 3, you always want to play this. But yeah, this combo is what makes Paladin today. So if you're not playing these cards in your Paladin deck, then you're doing something wrong, because this is why Paladin is so strong now, is these 2 cards. They should never ever be cut from Paladin, ever. Even if you're playing dragons in your deck, you should be playing one of these. No reason to play 0. Always play 1 or 2. And always play 2 musters. And I'm of course playing 2 sludge filters. I don't really think I need to explain that either. It's great against aggro, great against control. Card is just great all around, really. And you should probably play 1 or 2 in almost all your control decks. And I think 2 is the right number for this type of Paladin deck. But I definitely think you could play 1 of these if the meta is more control. But you probably would always play the 2 of this card anyways, because the meta would have to be a ton of control for you to justify playing only 1. But yeah, great card. Play 1 or 2, whatever. Sylvanas is a card which is better if the meta is more control. It's kind of the same as Sir Drake. The more control the meta becomes, the more likely it is you will be playing Sylvanas. And right now the meta is a bit control-y, so I'm playing Sylvanas. I wasn't playing it earlier in the season because there was so much aggro, but I think it's good now. Because yeah, against control, they're gonna have to trade into Sylvanas to win the game. But if you're playing against aggro, you're just gonna like ignore her and go face, and you're just gonna lose the game. And also if the meta's lot of silence, she kind of loses value. Like if every time you play this it gets silenced, you also shouldn't be playing her. So you really need to take into consideration how many silences are being run and how much aggro the meta is. And just find the spot where you want to play her in. And yeah. She's not a staple in Paladin though, by far. If there's ever a better 6-drop for Paladin, she will for sure be cut. But currently there is no better 6-drop, so she should be played. This card's broken. Lay on hands is to draw cards. I don't really use the healing effect too much. Some games it wins me against Face Hunter, but it's really just to draw cards. It's like a super strong draw cards mechanic. And healing 4 health isn't a bad thing either. I mean, healing 8 health isn't a bad thing either. And healing 8 health basically means it's extremely good against aggro, and it's extremely good against control as well. So you should always play one of these. I don't think 2 is good though. I think 2 just makes your car way too ugly. Or way too inconsistent. And I'm sorry if I kind of lisp or say some of the words twice. It's because I'm not used to talking English on or into a microphone. I'm really sorry for that. It's gonna be better when I just start doing this more, because I had a short break from doing YouTube and Twitch, so my English is kind of weird now, so I have some problems with getting the words out. But yeah, as I said, back to lay on hands. Always play 1 or 2 for the most part. If your deck's really, really aggro heavy, you might play 0. But I think you should always play this because drawing 3 cards is great. Healing 8 is probably great most of your games. Like some of your games, the heal 8 is gonna win you the game. Some of your games, the draw 3 cards is gonna win you the game. Really, really good card. And it's draw, which is something that Paladin really, really lacks. Drawing 3 cards is great because, yeah, Paladin really needs draw. And this card is really great as well. I'm not going to explain this too much. The card is just great. Play this card. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all the cards that is in this list, at least. I'm gonna be talking a bit about some cards that you could be playing and some cards that you should never be playing, but people are suggesting me to play. And I'll start with 9 mana, of course. And I'll start with Sylvanas, or I mean Ysera. And Ysera is a card that, because of Dragon Consort, a lot of people think she's really good. And I don't really take into consideration that you would never play Ysera anyways. Even if she has synergy with Dragon Consort, she still is just too high of a mana costed minion to even be played. Like, sure, you can play her for 7 mana, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, of course, if you could play a 4/12 or with this effect for 7 mana consistently, you would play her, but because you can't consistently play her for 7 mana, she just isn't that good. I mean, I only play Boom and Tyrion in this deck, and it's not because there isn't better options, or I mean, there isn't any better options to these two cards, but it's not because I don't think there's any good late game cards, it's because I don't want to play more late game cards. And playing Ysera and Hornifarian alongside Tyrion and Dr. Boom. You will always be playing Tyrion and Dr. Boom, so you're always going to play these two alongside those two cards. This makes your deck way too heavy on the curve, and you really don't need that. You don't need to play Ysera and Dr. Boom to win the game, and a lot of games are just going to sit in your hand. I think this card it's just bad most of the games. Doesn't win you the tempo game, doesn't win you the late game because most classes have some way of dealing with this. And some classes have ways of winning the game if you play this, like playing Mind Control. I really don't see any reason to play this. It's good in some situations, but there's so few situations that it's good in. And you don't want your deck to be any more heavy than this. I think you could probably fit in maybe one more legendary on top of these. But if you're playing Ysera, you would need to play Dragon Consort as well, and then you also want to be playing Nefarian, and then your deck becomes bad and stuff. So, and yeah, Nefarian's the same. Card is actually pretty good, but it's a Beam Hunter target, which is kind of annoying, and it's 9 mana, and you would never play anything 9 mana at the moment because, I mean, there's no point to play anything for 9 mana because the game is basically decided by like turn 5 to 7, so if you play something at 9 mana, it's not going to change the result of almost any of your games. No point really in playing those. Ragnaros you could play, but it's the same thing. It's just for 8 mana, you would either want your card to be Dr. Boom or have Taunt, and Ragnaros doesn't have Taunt, and there's so much Death Rattle. Like if you play this and it hits Creeper or Scientist or whatever, something with Death Rattle, it's just not good. It's lost a lot of value after next, so I don't think this card is too great in Paladin. It's really good against Freeze Mage, and it's really good against Rogue, which is basically why you would play this, I guess. So if there's a ton of Rogue and a ton of Freeze Mage, you could probably play this, but there needs to be a lot of Rogue and Freeze Mage for this to be justified in a deck. I could see it being played, but needs to be a lot of Freeze Mage and Rogue. This card, people also suggest a lot. They say, oh, Kel'Thuzad, you play him, you sacrifice your minions, and you get a ton of value. Well, the problem is just that if you have 2 minions you can sacrifice and get value from, you're usually going to have won the game anyways. Um, and that's probably going to happen like 1 out of maybe like 5 games. And the rest of the games, Kel'Thuzad is going to sit in your hand and do nothing, and you're going to wonder why you're playing this card instead of something else. And yeah, it's good in the control meta, of course. If the meta is a lot of control, this card is definitely good. But right now, there is still aggro. You can pretty much never play this if there's a lot of Hunter or Sue or really anything that's not control. So yeah, it's probably a win more card most of the time. And this card is garbage. It basically just says draw a card at the end of your turn And it loses a whole mana in stats, and it costs 8 mana. I mean, there's no reason why this card is good. I mean, if you just look at the card and like try and play it for a bit, you're gonna see why it's bad. I'm not gonna explain this too much. You should never play this card. It's horrible. I don't think there's any one of these you want to be playing. I mean, you could play around if the meta's more control, but it would probably never be that much control. You can play Guardian of Kings if the meta is a lot of Druid though. If it's a lot of Druid, you want to play this instead of something. And oh yeah, this card. I have no clue why people are playing this card in their Paladin lists. If you ever see someone playing this in their Paladin list, just steer away from that deck because it's not going to be good. This card is so bad in Paladin. It gains you no value. You have almost no card draw, so you're gonna be getting like maybe 2 or 4 mana with this. So it's like an innervate for basically 1.5 mana in stats, and it costs 6 mana. I mean, there's no combos you want to be playing in Paladin, so the most value you're gonna get out of this is having this on turn 6, then Doctor Boom and Zombie Chow on turn 7. And in that scenario, you would much rather like to play Sylvanas because, I mean, it's much more value stealing one of your opponent's minions or baiting a silence target. So, yeah, I mean, I have no idea why people are playing this. I guess just someone, like some random pro streamer, just thought this card was good and everyone started playing it. It's just, it doesn't do enough to be played. As I already said, like, all of my cards, like all the cards in my deck, fulfills a purpose, like a role. Like all these cards do. They have some kind of like thing that they do, like some kind of role. Like one of them, Zombie Chow, for example, is a card that denies early tempo. This denies early tempo, and it's also like a late game silence threat removal thing. This is removal. This is, I mean, this board clean and like a way to win the game. This is against aggro. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna summarize them all, but I mean, you get the point. All these cards do something for the deck. They serve a specific role, and this card doesn't serve that any role. It's just a 5/5 for 6 mana that gives you 3 mana for free. I mean, that's not a role. That's just like a good card. It doesn't. It's not justified enough to be played. Like this serves a role because um it gives you back the board. But this doesn't serve a role. There's just no reason to play this. I have no idea why people are playing this in classes like Paladin and Control Warrior. Just don't play this. I'm not going to explain it too much because I'm kind of low on time. I'm explaining these cards a lot, by the way. I'm trying to explain them quickly, but it takes a while. Black Knight is also a card that you can play in Paladin. Or this is a, or not also, this is a card you could play in Paladin, which you only want to be playing if there's a Ramp Druid meta. A lot of people just like to slap this in Paladin as a staple, but it's only good in the Ramp Druid meta. Any other meta, you would just lose value from this. Because Black Knighting a Sledge Belcher really isn't that good. Because it's going to happen like 1 out of something games, and then the rest of the games are just going to sit in your hand, and you get the point. But in the Ramp Druid meta, or really control heavy taunt meta, then this card is going to get insane value and you should play it. But there's no, it's not a staple. You should only play this in that meta. And then 5 mana, I already talked about these. And this is pretty good if your deck is even more aggro than mine is. If your deck is um, just all based around removing early threats and snowballing like Xzirez, then you should play this because it snowballs with your weapons and so forth. So on. So yeah, it's pretty good in Paladin. It's not a staple. It's tech if you want to go even more aggro. Lothab is also a tech if there's a lot of priests, rogues, and druids. It's really good against those 3 classes. It shouldn't be looked at as a staple because it doesn't fulfill a role, as I talked about earlier. It makes your priest, rogue, and druid matchup a lot easier. So it's a tech card. If you're meeting a lot of Druid, Priest, and Rogue, you should definitely play this. But if you're not meeting a lot of those classes, then you shouldn't be playing this. It's should be looked at as a tech against those classes, not a staple or anything. And this is also a tech. This is also something that people like to think of as a staple, and I have no idea why. It's only going to be good if one half to one third of your games you're going to be against control heavy weapon classes, which is basically only warrior and paladin, because against hunter, turn 5 removing their weapon isn't really that much, or it isn't really that much worth. They're just going to hit you in the face anyways and play a new weapon, so it really doesn't matter. And if you play this without the weapon effect, it's a 5/4 for 5 mana, which you would never play. I mean, you wouldn't even play a 4/5 for 4 mana ever, so why would you play a 5/4 for 5 mana that 1 out of 6 of your games, or 5 out of your games, might give you extra card and the weapon removal? So this effect needs to hit really, really often for this card to be good. If it doesn't hit a lot, then the card is just a 5/4 for 5 mana that sometimes draws you a card. You could basically just say 1 out of 8 times you play this card, draw a card, and that's not good. This is another card people constantly keeps telling me to play, and the reason I'm not playing this, you could test this card for yourself if you want, and you'll see why it's not good, but I'll try and explain it now. Paladin never really wants to trade a lot of their minions in. They really value board control and some face damage early. Like, you're never going to want to trade your Knife Juggler or your Muster tokens just to draw a couple of cards. It really doesn't, and the card is just weak stat-wise. If this card had different stats, then it would be good, but since the stats are so crappy, it basically just reads like draw X amount of cards for each troop that dies. The body doesn't really matter a lot of times because it's so easily removed. And yeah, you don't even want to trade your tokens in. I mean, if you draw cards, it doesn't matter because Paladin is so much centered around board. The cards are just not going to do anything. You need card draw that is stable and card draw that has some versatility. Like Xzirez has spell damage, which is really good, right? So it combos to Consecrate if you need that. It's 4/4 body, so it's pretty hard to remove. They at least need to use some resources playing it. And it doesn't need you, like, you don't need to have a board in order to draw the cards. So it's much, much, much less inconsistent, or it's much more consistent, I mean. And same goes for Lay on Hands. This is always going to draw you 3 cards, and it's always going to restore 8 health. This is sometimes going to draw you 3 cards and might soak up 2 damage, or they might just go face and ignore it. And you could also play Argus. But I think Blessing of Kings is just a better Argus. The only reason you would play this if there's a lot of hunters and druids. So if there's a lot of hunters, then you probably want to play this. But I think Blessing of Kings is just overall better. They do both do the same job most of the times. But Blessing is just better because you don't need 2 minions and it's also burst. And I also played Senjin a bit early in the meta, and I think it's pretty clear. I'm just going to summarize this with a few words, and it's basically just played against aggro. If there's a lot of aggro, you want to play this. And that's basically it. A lot of aggro cards, or a lot of aggro decks, and you play this instead of something else. And that's all. And here is another card that I think you could be playing in Paladin, and I think it's pretty good, actually. It's a pretty good draw source, and it's a pretty good minion for Paladin overall. The only problem is that it's on the same turn where you want to play Muster, or Knife Juggler, or Zombie Chow, or Chile Minibot. It's so early in the game, and it's so weak a lot of times. It doesn't give you too much board, it just gives you draw. And sometimes that's enough in some metas, but in the card meta it's not. But I think you could justify playing this if there's a meta with a lot of tokens you want to kill. If there's a lot of mirror matches and druids, you definitely want to play this. Then this card is great. But it only really shines a lot. Like it's really good in the mirror, and that's basically the only matchup where it's really, really good. In other matchups, there are other cards that are better. But if there's a lot of mirror matches and druids, then this card is great. And I don't think there's anything else. I think I'm done now. I tried making this pretty fast. Oh yeah, okay, there's one more card. This card should never be played in Paladin. Please don't play this. It's a dead card in your hand, controls a minion, if you're lucky. And yeah, never play this card. Yeah, I think there's no more cards. You could play Hunter Creeper if there's a lot of aggro and hunters, but it's only good against hunter, so there will be a lot of hunter to justify playing this. Yeah, that's definitely it though. Hunter Creeper is the last card you could potentially play in hunter, or against hunter, I mean, in Paladin. There's really no more cards you want to be playing. There's no point in playing a faster Paladin deck, and there's no point in playing a slower Paladin deck either. If there is a mid-range deck for a class, you always want to play the mid-range deck because the mid-range deck is just better than control and aggro. And I'm pretty sorry if this was kind of fast, but I tried making this really fast so I would fit it in a short video. Didn't want to make this really I didn't really want to make this like a really long video. So yeah. And I'll make some more and with better quality, and they're going to be edited and stuff. Was made all in one. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in another video. And I'll make more general deck talks and general talks, and they will be longer, but this is just the first, and it's just going to be like a test kind of. The other ones are probably going to be better. It's just I made this really quickly just because I wanted to just talk about the deck basically and try and do this. So yeah, thank you so much for watching.